It was 7 o'clock on a Friday evening when I sat at a corner table in a quiet downtown bistro, checking my watch for the fourth time. My sister Rachel had texted me 20 minutes earlier. Tori. Blue dress. 7 p.m. Don't run. Then the front door opened, and CEO Victoria Hartwell walked in, looking like she had stepped off the cover of a business magazine. My pulse spiked in pure panic. Assuming she was here for a high-powered dinner, I stood up and headed straight for the service hallway. Footsteps echoed behind me, and a soft voice called out, "Jack!" I turned, clearing my throat. "Ms. Hartwell, I didn't know you ate here." She stepped closer, her eyes sparkling with suppressed amusement as she leaned in and whispered, "Jack, I'm your blind date." 3 months before I found myself cornered near a restaurant kitchen by my chief executive officer, my life was a carefully constructed fortress of predictable routines. Every morning began at 6:15 in my suburban townhouse, hunting down a missing left sneaker while my 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, sat on a bar stool drawing comic books. Sophie called her main character Dadman. Dadman's primary superpowers included locating lost homework, making decent grilled cheese, and falling asleep on the couch 20 minutes into any PG movie. I argued Dadman deserved laser vision or flight, but Sophie insisted finding lost shoes was far more practical for a single father. My ex-wife and I had separated amicably 4 years ago. There was no bitterness. We were simply two good people who wanted different lives. She had moved for a specialized medical research career, remaining an active presence through video calls and summer visits, while I was Sophie's primary caregiver. My world revolved around a strict schedule: school drop-off at 7:45, my desk at Hartwell Development by 8:30, a hard stop at 5 o'clock, and evenings dedicated entirely to third-grade math and Lego fortresses. At Hartwell Development, a major commercial real estate firm, I worked as a senior facilities project manager. My domain wasn't the polished glass offices on the 38th floor. It was the dusty construction sites and office renovations where physical work happened. Known as the unyielding manager who could untangle supply chain delays and catch structural errors before lawsuits happened, I took pride in my work while keeping an immovable boundary between job and family. I skipped corporate galas, and my phone went on silent at 6 o'clock. That boundary was forged from a painful lesson. 2 years prior, I had dated a woman named Laura Bennett. After 6 months, Laura grew frustrated over my non-negotiable parenting schedule. The breaking point arrived on a Friday when Sophie caught a high fever, forcing me to cancel a weekend getaway. Laura stood in my hallway, stating flatly that she liked me, but had no interest in playing second fiddle to an 8-year-old child's temperature chart. We broke up that night. Holding a cold washcloth to my daughter's forehead, I made a rule. Sophie's emotional stability was my absolute priority. Over time, that protective wall hardened into my default setting. If you don't let anyone in, no one gets hurt. Victoria Hartwell existed in a different universe. She was 32, fiercely intelligent, and had taken over as CEO 2 years ago. While the board constantly scrutinized her every move, Victoria managed the corporate helm with cool authority. To middle management, she was an intimidating figure who appeared only during quarterly reviews. My only direct interaction with her occurred 6 months earlier during a chaotic renovation project downtown. A director had tried to sweep a ceiling grid defect under the rug to meet a deadline. I refused to sign off on safety clearance, halting the job site. When Victoria walked onto the dusty floor in a tailored suit to inspect the dispute, executives braced for impact. I stood my ground, presenting structural data without corporate double talk. Victoria looked at the schematics, looked at me, and overridden the director on the spot. She nodded once, a quiet gesture of professional respect that I promptly forgot about. What I didn't know was that my sister, Rachel, was conspiring behind my back. Rachel was close friends with Hannah Brooks, Victoria's former college roommate, and one of the few who saw Victoria as a real human being rather than a corporate title. Rachel badgered me for months to go on a blind date with Tori, a 32-year-old real estate developer who had zero issues with my single dad status. Meanwhile, Hannah pitched me to Victoria as Jack, a grounded project manager completely immune to corporate brown nosing. Neither mentioned our employer names. When Rachel sent me a blurry side profile photo of Tori an hour before the date, I hadn't recognized my CEO. But when Hannah texted Victoria a photo of me with Sophie on a hiking trail, Victoria recognized the project manager instantly. Instead of canceling, Victoria put on a stunning dark blue dress, drove downtown, and stepped into the bistro to see if I would face her, or run for the exit. Standing near the swinging doors of the restaurant kitchen with soft jazz floating through the air, I stared at my CEO in paralyzed silence. Victoria stood 2 feet away, dark hair falling over her shoulders, her eyes glittering with amusement. "Tori," I managed to choke out. "Friends call me Tori," she replied softly, gesturing toward the main room. "And unless you intend to spend the evening next to the busing station, Mr. Miller, I suggest we take our table." My brain ran risk assessment protocols at terrifying speed. Dating a coworker was complicated, but dating the chief executive officer of the company funding my daughter's health insurance was an operational nightmare. "Ms. Hartwell," I whispered as I walked beside her. "If someone from corporate sees us—" "Jack," she interrupted gently, sliding into the leather booth. "It is 7:15 on a Friday night. The board of directors is drinking scotch at their country club, and HR is not under our table. Sit down." I sat across from her, feeling as if I had stepped onto scaffolding without a harness. "Rachel is going to pay for this," I muttered. Victoria let out a melodic laugh that instantly shattered the icy image I had held of her for 2 years. "Hannah is currently receiving a very angry text message from me as well," she admitted. "When she sent me your photo, I nearly turned my car around." "Why didn't you?" I asked, looking her straight in the eye. "It would have been the logical corporate decision." Victoria leaned forward slightly. "Because logic is wonderful for financial forecasts, Jack, but it makes for a remarkably dull personal life," she said softly. "Every man I've been set up with either spends the night trying to impress me with his portfolio, or becomes terrified the moment he remembers my last name. You were the only man who I knew for a fact wasn't afraid to tell me the truth." Her honesty caught me off guard. For the next 2 hours, corporate boundaries dissolved. We made an explicit pact. No talk of quarterly budgets, no subcontracts, and no corporate titles. Without her executive persona, I discovered Tori was witty, surprisingly grounded, and possessed a dry, self-deprecating humor. She confessed that while she could navigate a $50 million acquisition contract, she was a disaster in the kitchen and had set off her smoke alarms attempting to boil basic pasta. "Pasta doesn't fear getting fired, Jack," she noted dryly. "It just burns." In return, I opened up about my life outside work. I talked about Sophie's passion for comic books and the daily reality of raising an 8-year-old girl alone. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking perceptive questions about Sophie's art projects and laughing delightedly at her witty observations. When the bill arrived, Victoria reached for her designer handbag, but I placed my credit card on the silver tray. She raised an eyebrow. "Jack, I can comfortably buy this restaurant." "I am well aware of your financial capacity, Ms. Hartwell," I replied. "But this was a blind date, not a corporate acquisition. We split it 50-50, or I'm taking the bus home." She stared at me for 3 seconds before a radiant smile broke across her face. "50-50 it is, Mr. Miller." When we stepped into the cool night air, I walked her to her car and opened the door politely. "Thank you for not running out the back exit, Jack," Tori said softly through her open window. "Thank you for making me realize the food here is worth staying for," I replied with a crooked smile. Monday morning arrived with crushing reality. The moment I stepped into corporate headquarters to drop off blueprints, I ended up in the main lobby elevator alongside 3 senior directors when Victoria walked in, flanked by her assistant. The air turned formal. I instinctively stepped to the back corner. Victoria glanced at me through the mirror wall, her expression reverting to her impenetrable CEO mask. "Good morning, Mr. Miller," she said crisply. "Good morning, Ms. Hartwell," I replied flatly. An hour later at my field office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Coffee tonight? Same quiet cafe near your job site. 5:30 p.m. I stared at the screen, internal alarm bells ringing. Dating the CEO was a professional minefield. If rumors started circulating, my reputation as an unbiased project manager would be destroyed. I tapped out a reply. I don't think this is smart, Tori. Professional boundaries exist for a reason. 2 minutes later, her response popped up. I know. I'll order you a dark roast. See you at 5:30. I let out a low groan, realizing my carefully built walls were completely useless against a woman who refused to acknowledge their existence. Over the next 3 weeks, Victoria and I navigated a secret tightrope. At the office, we were strictly Senior Facilities Project Manager Jack Miller and Chief Executive Officer Victoria Hartwell. But after hours, in quiet coffee shops or late-night phone calls after Sophie was asleep, we were simply Jack and Tori, two adults falling for each other amidst real life. Our professional boundary faced its first massive test when the company launched its flagship project, the $60 million Riverstone Plaza overhaul downtown. The chief operating officer assigned me as lead project manager based on my structural track record. When the assignment hit my inbox, I marched straight to the 38th floor, requested a private meeting with Victoria, and closed her door behind me. I need you to reassign Riverstone Plaza, Tori, I said firmly. Victoria set her pen down. On what technical grounds, Jack? You are the most qualified facilities manager in this firm for a high-density structural overhaul. On the grounds that if anyone finds out about us, my credibility is shot, I argued, keeping my voice low. Every time I negotiate a budget or demand a safety hold, people will say I'm hiding behind the CEO. I won't let office gossip turn me into a corporate favorite. Victoria looked at me with soft respect and quiet frustration. Jack, the CEO assigned you to Riverstone 3 days before our blind date took place, she said gently. If I pull you off this job now, it will look like I lack confidence in your work. I won't compromise your professional standing. We will handle this with absolute transparency. I am logging a formal conflict of interest waiver with HR, recusing myself from direct oversight over Riverstone Plaza. The COO will have sole authority. Her solution was professional and airtight, protected my independence while utilizing my skills. You're very good at your job, Ms. Hartwell, I admitted softly. I know, Mr. Miller, she replied with a playful wink. Now get back to work. While our professional boundaries were secure, my personal fortress soon faced a far sweeter challenge. I had kept my relationship with Tori separate from my daughter. But reality has a way of dismantling meticulous plans. On a warm Saturday afternoon, Hartwell Development hosted its annual community outreach day at Riverstone Plaza. Employees gathered to paint murals and assemble playground equipment for a local youth center. I had brought Sophie along, dressed in her favorite paint-splattered overalls. While I helped carpenters secure a wooden gazebo frame, Sophie sat under a large oak tree working on her drawings. Minutes later, I looked over and saw a sight that made my heart freeze. Victoria was sitting cross-legged on the grass right beside my daughter. She had traded her executive suit for a gray sweater and dark jeans, her hair in a messy ponytail. She was leaning over Sophie's sketchbook, listening with rapt attention as Sophie explained the backstory of her Dad Man comic series.
I walked over carefully.
Sophie, sweetie, I said. I hope you're not bothering Ms. Hartwell. Sophie looked up, eyes wide with excitement. Dad, Miss Tori knows all about architectural scale. She said my secret headquarters design actually has proper structural load points. Victoria looked up at me with a mischievous smile. Your daughter is a genius, Jack. Her spatial awareness is better than half our junior design team. Boss Tori? Sophie asked, squinting. Wait, are you the boss Tori from Dad's office? Or the blind date Tori Aunt Rachel keeps talking about? I nearly choked on my breath, my face turning bright red. Victoria let out a delighted laugh that rang across the park. I happen to be both, Sophie, Tori revealed gently, winking. Though I think I prefer being blind date Tori. Sophie looked between us, piecing the puzzle together. She offered a decisive nod of approval. Okay, Sophie declared, turning back to her drawing. Dad usually runs away from pretty women because he gets nervous, but you can stay. You know how to draw proper floor plans. The icy tension in my chest dissolved completely. Later that evening, Sophie boldly invited Tori back to our townhouse for homemade pizza. Tori accepted the invitation without a second of hesitation. That night was pure magic. Tori proved to be gloriously terrible at rolling out dough, resulting in a misshapen oblong crust that Sophie gleefully named the flying saucer. They spent an hour decorating the dough, laughing like old friends. Tori was simply vibrant, genuine, and completely present. After dinner, when Sophie was in bed, Tori and I sat on the back porch drinking cold tea under the autumn stars. "You're amazing with her, Tori," I said softly. Tori turned her head. "She's an amazing kid, Jack. You've done an incredible job raising her." She gently took my calloused hand in hers. "Are you still terrified?" "I'm terrified of how much I like having you here," I confessed honestly. I spent 4 years convincing myself that keeping my life small was the only way to keep Sophie safe. But sitting in that kitchen tonight, watching you laugh, I realized how much I've missed having real warmth in this house. Tori stepped closer, resting her hand against my cheek. "You don't have to keep yourself locked in a fortress anymore, Jack," she whispered softly. "I'm not going anywhere." She leaned in and I met her halfway. The kiss was slow, deep, and filled with a quiet promise. But 2 days later, an anonymous internal email was sent to HR, posing a toxic question. "Is Senior Facilities Manager Jack Miller receiving preferential treatment on the Riverstone Plaza project due to a personal relationship with CEO Victoria Hartwell?" Martin Cole, an ambitious manager passed over for the lead role, had leveraged optics to his advantage. The rumor mill across the firm exploded overnight. The morning the rumor hit, I walked into the field office to find my team whispering near the coffee machine. The professional respect I had spent 15 years building felt like it was crumbling into dust. Every time I gave an order, I felt silent questions in the air. Did he earn that authority, or did he get it in the CEO's bedroom? My instinctual reaction, the cold, protective panic I relied on for years, reared its head. I marched straight to corporate headquarters and entered Victoria's office. "We're done, Tori," I said, my hands trembling as I closed the heavy glass door. Victoria looked up, her face pale, her eyes dark with exhaustion. "Jack, sit down. Let's talk about this rationally." "I am being rational," I spat out with bitter frustration. "Everything I've built in this industry is based on my reputation for absolute integrity. Now I'm the guy sleeping his way to the top of Riverstone Plaza. If I stay in this relationship, my professional credibility is zero. And if this leaks outside, it impacts Sophie." Victoria stood up slowly. "Jack, HR reviewed the timeline. The COO confirmed in writing that you were selected before we went on a date. We filed a formal conflict of interest waiver weeks ago. We did everything right. The optics don't care if we did everything right," I yelled. In the real world, people see a project manager getting a $60 million assignment from his CEO girlfriend. I won't let my career or my daughter become the subject of corporate gossip. Victoria looked at me, a single tear spilling over her lashes, but her voice was quiet. "You're doing it again, Jack," she whispered. "You're using your career and your daughter as an emotional shield because the moment things get messy, you panic. You call it doing the right thing, but you're just running away. I am protecting my family. You are protecting yourself from the possibility of failure," she countered, her voice cracking with wounded anger. "I recused myself from your department to protect your independence. I compromised my corporate standing because I loved you, Jack. But the second a rumor starts, you throw us away to keep your neat, safe little life intact." She turned her back, looking out the floor-to-ceiling window. "Get out of my office, Mr. Miller. Go manage your project." I walked out, feeling a cold, hollow void in my chest. For 10 days, the silence was unbearable. I threw myself into Riverstone Plaza with obsessive focus, working 14-hour days. But the empty space beside me felt suffocating. On a rainy Thursday evening, I sat at the kitchen island watching Sophie work on her comic book. She drew a picture of Dad Man running away from a tall building, while a woman in a suit stood on the roof looking down. Why is Dad Man running away, Soph? I asked softly. Sophie looked up with sharp eyes. Because Dad Man thinks if he runs fast enough, he won't get hurt, she said plainly. But he's just running in a big circle. He's going to end up right back where he started, except he's going to be tired and alone. Her simple truth hit me like a physical blow. That night, Rachel came over. I sat on the porch and confessed everything. Rachel looked at me and said, Daniel, Tori walked into your kitchen, made messy pizza with your daughter, and accepted every part of your world. You didn't break up with her because of corporate optics. You broke up with her because you're terrified that a brilliant woman actually loves you. The realization washed over me. I wasn't protecting my family. I was a coward hiding behind my responsibilities. The following morning, I walked straight into HR. I presented a formal proposal. I requested a permanent structural reporting line that placed my department under the sole jurisdiction of the COO and an independent board, completely removing the CEO position from my chain of command. I voluntarily agreed to an independent audit of the Riverstone Plaza contract to clear my name once and for all. Mr. Miller, this is extraordinary, the HR director said. You're voluntarily waiving executive promotion pathways that pass through the CEO. I don't need executive promotions, I said steadily. I just need my work judged on its own merits and the freedom to love the woman I choose. At 7 o'clock on Friday evening, I stood outside the quiet downtown Italian bistro where our journey had begun. Rain drizzled softly against the pavement, reflecting the warm amber lights of the restaurant window. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Victoria. Tori, bistro, 7 p.m. No corporate talk. No running. 5 minutes passed, then 10. My heart hammered violently against my ribs. I had hurt her deeply, and I had no right to expect her to stand in the rain for a man who had panicked at the first sign of trouble. Then, a sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. Victoria stepped out holding a black umbrella. She walked slowly toward me, her expression guarded. You realize this is the exact spot where you tried to escape through the kitchen, Jack? She said quietly. I checked the floor plan, I replied with a soft smile. The emergency exits are all locked. You're stuck with me. Victoria didn't smile. Why am I here, Jack? I stepped out from under the awning into the cool drizzle. Because I was an idiot, Tori, I said with absolute honesty. I spent 4 years using my daughter and my job as a bulletproof vest. Every time I felt myself falling for you, I looked for an excuse to run because I was terrified that if I let you into my heart, I wouldn't survive losing you. Victoria watched me, her breath catching slightly. I went to HR this morning, I continued, handing her a copy of the stamped administrative waiver. I placed my department under a permanent independent board. My career is mine, built by my own hands, and no rumor can take that away from me. I don't care about corporate optics anymore, Tori. I love you. I love Tori who burns pasta. I love Tori who helps my daughter draw load-bearing walls. And I even love the CEO who rejects my budget proposals. Victoria looked down at the official HR document in her hand, then looked up at me, her dark eyes brimming with tears. You really filed a permanent administrative recusal just to ask me out on a date? She asked with a breathless, half-laughing sob. I'd file 10 more if that's what it takes to keep you in my life, I answered softly, framing her soft face in my hands. No more running, Tori. Victoria dropped her umbrella onto the wet pavement, wrapped her arms tightly around my neck, and pulled me down into a deep, desperate kiss that erased every lingering doubt. 1 year later, the Riverstone Plaza project opened to massive critical acclaim, coming in on time and under budget. The independent audit cleared my name completely, proving my lead assignment was earned purely through technical excellence. On a crisp Saturday afternoon, our townhouse was alive with golden light. In the kitchen, Victoria was attempting to bake chocolate chip cookies, her face lightly dusted with flour, as she argued good-naturedly with Sophie over the proper ratio of chocolate chips to dough. Sitting at the island, I watched the two most important people in my life laughing together, feeling a deep peace settle over my soul. Sophie held up a new page of her comic book. The main panel showed Dad Man standing proudly beside a beautiful woman in a suit, holding hands under a bright sky. The title read, Dad Man Finds His Partner. "Hey Dad," Sophie called out, grinning. "Is Miss Tori coming to dinner again next Friday?" I walked over, wrapped my arms around Victoria's waist from behind, and pulled her close as she laughed softly. "Every Friday at 7, kiddo?" I smiled, pressing a kiss against Tori's temple. "Forever." Have you ever allowed past heartbreak, fear of judgment, or professional anxieties to stop you from taking a chance on a relationship that was standing right in front of you? Have you ever had to learn the hard way that protecting your family doesn't mean building walls around your heart, but building a bigger, warmer space where real love can belong? If the story of Jack, Victoria, and Sophie touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What was the moment you realized that taking a leap of faith in love was worth the risk? Never allow fear to dictate the boundaries of your future. Real courage isn't the absence of vulnerability. It is the willingness to open your heart, stand your ground, and trust that the right person will always meet you halfway.